Hi, everybody. How's it going? It's Great Valley Pool Service here in Fraser, PA. We just wanted to take a few minutes here to break down the basic pool chemistry in your typical swimming pool. We're going to cover a few different things, but first, we're located at 446 Lancaster Avenue in Fraser, PA, and our phone number here is 610-889-0711. So if you have any questions about what we discussed today, or if you'd like to stop by our retail store and learn a little bit more, please feel free to do so. You can give us a call or stop on in. So first, we're going to talk about a couple of different things. Obviously, that was the introduction here, but we're going to break down sanitizers versus balancers. We're going to talk a little bit about the LSI, what that is and what that means for your pool. We're going to break down the balancing chemicals in each individual one, stuff that's going to adjust your pH, your calcium, your alkalinity, all that good stuff. We're going to break that down. And of course, a maintenance plan. But first and foremost, let's get started and talk about sanitizers versus balancers. Sanitizers are what disinfect your pool. They're going to destroy any disease-causing bacteria, anything growing in the water if it's non-sterile, or anything, of course, that grows over the winter, or anything else that gets in your pool. Sweat, sunscreen, oils of any type. Sanitizers are going to help fight against all of that. An oxidizer is going to supplement your sanitizer. Sometimes you're going to see something, a lot of the time you'll see this for spas, but you can see it for pools as well, called a shock oxidizer. It's going to include chlorine or any other type of sanitizer really, but also be an oxidant. It's going to burn away some of that organic matter. You can get some pollen in your water, obviously some algae. That's something that we're constantly fighting against. All that stuff is going to be fought on by your oxidizer. Balancing chemicals. This is going to balance the actual components of the water. We're talking the pH, the alkalinity, the calcium, stuff that I briefly mentioned before. But something to know is that your balanced water, or that having balanced water, is going to make the sanitizer more efficient. It's going to make the water more comfortable as well. The hardness of the water is something that we adjust with the calcium. So that's a comfort thing. Salt pools, also salt can be a water softener. Not the main function in a salt pool, but just something that's a part of it. And also it's going to prevent damage to your equipment by keeping your water balanced. And I'm going to dig into that a little bit more in just a bit. That ties into the LSI. So just breaking that down. But the very next slide here is about sanitizers. Couple different things here. You're going to see that the very first sanitizer is chlorine gas. It's actually not something that you're going to be handling like physically. The salt chlorine generator creates this, and I'm going to dig into that in just a little bit here. But we also have liquid chlorine. This liquid chlorine, you can think of it as bleach. The stuff that we carry here is 12% by volume. But liquid chlorine, really great. You can use it in pretty much every single pool. Works well as a sanitizer. Granulated chlorine is another one. Literally, it's going to be like a grain. Pellets, you can think of it as. It's chlorine in like pellet form. It's solid. You can get it in a few different sizes. And that's got a couple of other things kind of associated with it. There's some stabilizer in there, which I'm going to break down in a later slide. Chlorine tablets, very similar to granular chlorine, except this is going to be like a hockey puck. What we carry here at Great Valley Pool Service is a 3-inch and a 1-inch size, respectively, for pools and spas. But that's going to be similar to the granulated chlorine in that it has chlorine, but it's also going to have some stabilizer, which once again we'll break down in a little bit. Bromine, that's a different sanitizer than chlorine, for example, bromine and chlorine. Bromine is very kind of specific. Some spas use it, some older pools use it. It's not as common to see anymore, but that is an option. Bromine can be purchased in tablet form or liquid form as well, mostly in tablet form. But moving on from that, the salt chlorine generator. Something that I mentioned with chlorine gas, with the salt chlorine generator, it's actually going to have, for pools that use this, there will be salt in the water. And it's going to pass through your equipment as typical, but it's going to pass through something called a salt chlorine generator, or what we call a salt cell. And there's a little process called electrolysis where it actually takes that salt and converts it into chlorine gas. Really cool science with that. But that chlorine gas is going to blend into the water that passes through that salt cell, and it's going to sterilize your pool. One thing about salt pools versus typical chlorine pools is they both have chlorine in them. A lot of customers that have salt pools or salt chlorine generators to think that there isn't any chlorine or that there's a lot less chlorine, but that's actually not the case. It's going to regulate that chlorine content using the salt, which is a very nice feature, very handy. One thing that I will mention about the salt chlorine generator is that it does have a byproduct of a pH increaser. So if you do have a salt pool, you may be realizing, or you may be wondering, why you have to adjust your pH more frequently than possibly other people that you know with pools, or any other pools that you may have had in the past. That's why. The process of electrolysis converts salt into chlorine and creates a byproduct of a pH increaser. So that's kind of the breakdown of that. It's pretty cool science there. We have one here in the store if you're interested in checking that out. But moving on, liquid chlorine. Just to break this down a little bit more, I briefly mentioned that what we carry is 12% by volume. You can find it 10, 12%. That's pretty common. The pH of liquid chlorine is a 13, so it's almost entirely basic. It's also unstabilized. This is something that I'm going to break down in a little bit with the chlorine stabilizer. I've got a whole section dedicated to that, but just know that liquid chlorine does not include any stabilizer. This is what they would consider the original form of chlorination. Pools in the 70s, 80s, maybe before even, were using just strictly liquid chlorine to sanitize their water. That was kind of the only option back then. It comes in returnable containers. You're not going to find it in like a gallon jug like you see in this picture. We actually carry it in a 5-gallon blue container with a yellow cap. If you were to purchase that from us, you are also able to return the container once empty, and we can give you a deposit back on that, which is really nice. It doesn't need to dissolve in water. Obviously, it's already a liquid, so it just blends right in. No big deal there. It is slightly heavier than water, just as a heads up. Personally, I pour it in the shallow end. It'll fill up your shallow end of the pool and kind of work its way into the deep end and circulate around. But yeah, so it's obviously a little bit heavier than water, and it's already a liquid. So there you go. Leaves no residue, of course, being a liquid. There's nothing to leave. And it is the purest form of chlorine. There's no additives. When we break down different types of chlorine, we're going to talk about stabilizer. This doesn't have any, so there's no additional parts to it. It's just strictly liquid chlorine. Here's granulated chlorine. This is the pellet stuff that I was talking about earlier. You can get it in a few different sizes. We carry it in a 25-pound bucket, 5 pounds, 2 pounds, a few different options there, but it dissolves very fast. It's very safe and very easy to carry. You can pick it up with your hand. Of course, I'd wash your hand off afterward, but you can pick it up. It's not going to hurt you. It can be stored for long periods because it's stabilized, because it's a solid. Actually, it's a solid because of the stabilizer. That's kind of part of that. It all kind of creates that. But yeah, it can be stored for long periods, whereas liquid chlorine cannot. Liquid chlorine, being unstabilized, does denature over time. That means it loses its potency over a period of time. This does not. This is going to stay pretty nice so long as it stays dry. You don't want to let it get wet and then store it. You got to leave it dry. They call it dichlor. It's 99%. And this is a great instant chlorination for daily use. One thing that I will mention is you can't use this strictly. More that I dig into the the stabilizer, the more I'll tell you that you can't use it exclusively or daily. You kind of have to circle around different types of chlorine. Why? Stabilizer can build up and become too excessive in your pool. I'm going to dig into that in a little bit. I've actually got a little more information on that for you, but just know that you can't use this every single day. You can use it a lot. You can just cycle through different types of chlorine, but this is not an everyday, all the time sort of thing. Same with the tablets. I could tell you the same thing, is that you can use them, obviously. They're really great for keeping a chlorine level in your pool. Just be careful using too much of it. You don't want to have too much stabilizer in your water. It's 99% available chlorine. I mentioned that we can get it in 3-inch or 1-inch sizes. It's like a little hockey puck. It's slow and steadily dissolving. You have them in floaters in your pool. You're going to see like a couple of different floaters. We carry a bunch of different designs, from stuff that looks like a little blue and white buoy to stuff that looks like a rubber duck floating around. But this is a good way to keep a chlorine residual in your water, just a presence of chlorine, which is what you're going to want. You don't want to let it spike and fall. You kind of want to even it out over that time. You do not need to add it daily based on conditions. It will dissolve faster in hot water. It will dissolve slower in cold water. So you're just going to want to keep an eye basically on how fast or how slow it's dissolving and how often you're going to need to replenish it. And that's right here. It works on surface area, so replenish it as they dissolve. Just keep an eye on that because they will dissolve over time, especially in the middle of the summer when the water's hotter. So moving on to the LSI, this is something that I briefly mentioned before. It's called the Langmuir Saturation Index, which I'll read here is the measurement of water balance as defined by calcium carbonate concentration. So just to put it in English, it's going to measure basically if your plaster is going to etch or if scale is going to form. Corrosive water, or being on the low side of the LSI, is going to cause the etching. You actually can see that on the right-hand picture that I've posted. I posted a picture of a pool without water in it. It's a little bit easier to see that way. You definitely feel it in person. The plaster is much rougher. It's uneven. It's going to have spots all over it. You can kind of see that right there. Or on the high side, of course, the scale forming side, this is going to leave calcium deposits, calcium carbonate deposits. It could leave it all over your tile. You could leave it inside the pool as rough bumps. It basically ruins the surface of your pool. It's going to be very rough. Sometimes the bumps that it leaves can actually be kind of sharp. So you really want to be careful of that. And there's a couple of different things that go into the LSI. The pH, the alkalinity, and the calcium all kind of go together. And of course, the water temperature, which is a non-controllable unless if you have a heater. So that being said, that's kind of something that you want to keep an eye on. It's going to keep your plaster nice, especially keep an eye on it if you get new plaster. So breaking that down and moving on, balancing chemicals. As we break down some of these balancing chemicals, I'll tell you how they tie into the LSI. pH rise and pH lower are two chemicals that you can get to obviously rise and lower the pH. Something that also lowers pH is muriatic acid. You can see that on the bottom of the list here. And two other options here, or two other items, calcium hardness or just calcium flakes is the chemical, and chlorine stabilizer, which is cyanuric acid. But to move on from this list here, the pH, I'll just break down a little bit here. It's the abbreviation of potential hydrogen. It's going to tell us how much hydrogen is in the liquid and how active the hydrogen ion is. You can see here, there's a chart just breaking down what is high pH, what's low pH. People think that chlorine is like acidic and corrosive. It is corrosive, but it's not acidic. It's actually basic. It's a pH of 13 versus like a pH of 1, which is sulfuric acid. So there's just a couple of different things here. You can take a look at this list, see what it is. Just as a heads up, just as what we shoot for in water chemistry for your swimming pool, the pH that I like to shoot for is 7.2 to 7.6. Somewhere in there, it could be a little bit higher, it could be a little bit lower, but that's the ideal range. 7.4 is perfectly ideal for a swimming pool. So you can see it's just past perfectly neutral, or what this chart calls pure water, and just below seawater or eggs for that matter. But yes, 7.4 is perfectly ideal. The alkalinity, I'll read the quote here. It's the buffering capacity of a water body, a measurement of the ability of the water body to neutralize acids and bases and thus maintain a fairly stable pH level. To put that in English, the alkalinity is just simply going to be the buffer for your pH. The more that the alkalinity stays in the range, the ideal range, the less your pH will fluctuate. The ideal range in a swimming pool is anywhere between 80 parts per million to roughly 120 to 130 parts per million. I try to shoot for 90 to 100, but anywhere north of 80 and anywhere south of 130 is what you want to shoot for. This ties into your LSI, so did the pH, but this ties into your LSI in that if the alkalinity is too low, you're going to get into that corrosive side. It's going to actually start etching your plaster and do a few other things with that. And if it's too high, of course, that could cause scale building. Same with the pH. Too low or too high could definitely do the exact same thing, etch or scale, depending on what you're looking at here. But both high acidity and high alkalinity water will alter the effectiveness of your pool's chlorine. Is another thing just to keep an eye on. It's going to clearly disrupt your pool's disinfecting process because it's going to let the pH fluctuate, and it's going to just basically not allow your sterilizer to do what it's supposed to do. But that's alkalinity. Moving on to the calcium hardness, another part of the LSI. Calcium hardness is the measure of how hard or soft your pool water is, and it measures the amount of dissolved calcium in your swimming pool. Just like the pH, total alkalinity, it's important to keep the calcium hardness balanced to prevent your pool water from becoming corrosive or scaling. If it's low, the water is always going to seek calcium. The water always wants to have a little bit of calcium in it. And if the calcium content is low, it's going to leach it out of your plaster. That's the immediate way to see etching in your pool because it's going to pull that calcium out. It can also damage the grout between your tile. Just anything that's got calcium in it, it's going to pull it from that. So any surface, even if it's a concrete surfaced pool, it's got calcium in it. It's going to pull that out. High calcium content, it's going to damage your pool equipment by leaving calcium carbonate scaling on the inside of it. You'll actually see like white, it looks like a white crystal almost, and it's going to run a little bit. You'll have streaks of that can form on the inside of your equipment, that can form on your tile. Also, too high of calcium can cause cloudy water or a rough feeling surface. Cloudy water, obviously, just too much calcium in the water, and the rough feeling surface is going to be that scaling that we had mentioned before. It'll just leave a ton of calcium deposits, and that's going to be that. But moving on to chlorine stabilizer. This is something that's in pretty much every single form of solid chlorine, any chlorine that's turned into a solid. It's the stabilizer is the generic name given to cyanuric acid, which is the actual chemical is what it is. When added to an outdoor swimming pool, cyanuric acid bonds loosely to chlorine to minimize its degradation by UV light. The UV light that comes from the sun will absolutely denature your chlorine prematurely without any cyanuric acid. So it's good to have it. It's going to bond loosely to it, but too much stabilizer can actually affect how well the chlorine bonds with contaminants. The way that the chlorine functions, it's going to grab onto those contaminants and then kind of denature with it. It's going to kill any of that contaminant. But if there's too much stabilizer, there's no room for the chlorine to actually go ahead and grab onto those contaminants. It's going to make the chlorine less effective at sanitizing. And if your stabilizer is too high, it'll basically be completely ineffective. So this is something that's very important to keep an eye on. Also, just something on the low side, if the level of stabilizer in the water is too low, like lower than 20 parts, the chlorine in your pool will be almost completely gone in a few hours. The UV light from the sun will degrade it almost instantaneously, especially if it's liquid chlorine without any stabilizer included. But yeah, one thing to know about stabilizer that's very important is once it is too high, there is no way to remove stabilizer besides dumping pool water and diluting what you leave. Stabilizer is very difficult to get rid of. It can also stick to plaster. Sometimes you actually have to scrub the walls of the pool after draining it just to remove some of that extra stabilizer. It is tricky to get rid of, which is why earlier in this presentation I spoke about cycling through the different kinds of chlorine that you use. Obviously, liquid chlorine doesn't have any stabilizer in it, so once you add it, it doesn't increase the stabilizer level. But all of those solid forms of chlorine, the granulated, the tablets, powdered shocks, every solid form of chlorine has it in it. And which is why you can't exclusively use that stuff. It's going to be way too much stabilizer in your water eventually. Some pools, some clients have only used tablets, and then they test at a fine chlorine content, but maybe 3/4 of the way through the summer, hey, my chlorine content's really good, but I still have algae in my pool. I'm not sure why. That's why. The chlorine stabilizer, you can't let that get too high. So circle around the types of chlorine you're using, and it's going to work better for you. So last but not least, let's talk about a maintenance plan. Basically, the most important about a maintenance plan is going to be consistency. Do it frequently. I recommend doing your water chemistry once a week, if not more, especially after heavy rainstorms. You get a big summer rain, like a big heavy storm. You're going to want to check your water chemistry. That rainwater is going to add some stuff to your water. It's going to cause your chlorine to dissipate. It's going to mess up some of your other chemistry. So definitely check it minimum once a week, if not more, depending on what happens, how hot it is outside. The hotter it is outside, it could affect your water chemistry. So definitely check that out. Be consistent. Keep your pool water stable. Try to stay in the ideal ranges as frequently as possible. It's just going to look better. It's going to feel better. And add everything regularly. Clean your filter regularly as well. I know this is more about water chemistry, but if you have a diatomaceous earth filter, you're going to want to backwash that, especially in the heat of the summer, once every other week. 2 to 4 weeks is fine, but every other week, especially in the heat of the summer or with a pool that gets very heavy use, Definitely want to keep your filter clean. It's going to help with the water chemistry a lot. The flow is going to be better. The water chemistry is going to be easier to maintain. The pool is going to look nicer, and you're going to have a better time swimming. So just keep an eye on that. Be consistent with your maintenance plan. That's number one. And that's it. So thank you for taking the time to listen to me today. Hopefully this gave you a little bit of information that you did not have previously. And like I said before, if you have any questions, feel free to stop in our retail store or feel free to give us a call. We're happy to help you out any way we can. Once again, with our phone number and our address, 446 Lancaster Avenue in Fraser, Pennsylvania, 610-889-0711.